Dream Children, A Reverie, and this essay was written by Romantic prose writer Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb, he belonged to the 19th century and he is known as the Prince of English essayists. Children love to listen to stories about their elders. Okay. Charles Lamb, actually this essay is an autobiographical essay, and Charles Lamb, he was unmarried. He had no children, and this essay, as the title is suggesting, dream children. Children Alice and John. Okay, here are two imaginary children and their names are Alice and John. So this essay is a dreamy essay. It is an imagination, though it is an autobiographical essay, and here Charles Lamb, he is telling the psychology, the thinking of children, what they like. They always love to listen to stories. Stories about whom? About their elders. When they were children, to stretch their imagination. And why children love to listen to stories? To stretch their imagination, because children, they are very imaginative and they want to increase their imagination listening the stories about their elders. To the conception of a traditionary great uncle or grand, that is grandma. Now children, they always like to listen the stories about their elders. Their elders may be their uncle, great uncle or their grandmother whom they never saw. And why they are very curious? Children, they are always very curious because they had never seen their elders. It was in this spirit that my little ones, okay, my little ones. Who is this my? My is here Charles Lamb. So, because this is a personal essay and Charles Lamb is imagining that if he had got married, he would have children. So, this is why that he is using here this word my little ones crept about me to other evening to hear about their great grandmother Field. Who was Field? Field was the grandmother of Charles Lamb in reality, because it is a subjective essay. So, Mrs. Sarah Field, full name of his grandmother was Mrs. Sarah Field, and she is now the great grandmother of Charles Lamb's children, Charles Lamb's dreamy children or Charles Lamb's imaginary children. And his or their great grandmother Field, where she lived, who lived in a great house in Norfolk, right? Charles Lamb's grandmother named Field, she lived in a great house, in a very big house, and this house was where? In Norfolk. In Norfolk. And why he has used this word great house? It was a big house, and Charles Lamb is telling how much big that house was in Norfolk, in which his grandmother Field lived. It was 100 times bigger than that in which they his children, my little ones, okay. And Papa, who is this? It is Charles Lamb, imaginary. He is imagining that if he had kids, they would call him by this name, Papa. So lived. So that house was bigger than the house of their father, which had been her scene. So at least it was generally believed in that part of the country. And what was believed in that area? Of the tragic incident. So there was a general story of that house in Norfolk, and it was believed that a tragic incident has taken place in that house. The tragic incident which they had lately become familiar with from the ballad. The ballad, that is the poem of the name of the poem was, or the ballad, Children in the Wood. So now in this paragraph, Charles Lamb, what he tells us that children, they are very fond of listening to the stories of their elders and their forefathers, and they are always very curious to know what their elders did in their childhood or how they behaved when they were also children, and they always like to use their imagination to form an idea of the face or appearance of their elders. And this was the reason that one day Charles Lamb's imaginative children or dreamy children, they came to their father and they are very eager to know that because how their forefathers whom they never saw looked and behaved. So it was in this mood that one evening Lamb's children gathered round him to hear about their great grandmother Field, whom they had never seen. So here don't forget one thing that is very important for you to be aware, the fact that Charles Lamb was a bachelor, he had no children, and the children mentioned in this essay appeared to him only in a dream. That is why that they are called dream children. And this ballad of the children in the wood. So what was the story behind this? Lamb, he told his children, Lamb told his children that in the whole of the great house there was a wooden chimney. Ballad of the children in the wood. And certain it is that the whole story of the children, children in the wood, and their cruel uncle was to be seen fairly carved out in wood upon the chimney piece of the great hall. This story, the complete story was of those children. The whole story down to the robin redbreast, till a foolish rich person pulled it down to set up a marble one of modern invention in its stead, with no story upon it. So here Charles Lamb, he is telling the story that Mrs. Field, his grandmother, she lived in a great house in Norfolk, and the house had been the scene of many tragic incidents. Many tragic incidents. Those tragic incidents were described in the ballad of the children in the wood. This poem or this ballad contained the story of the children and their cruel uncle. That ballad or that poem, Children in the Wood, it contains the story of the children and their cruel uncle. And Lamb told his children that in the whole of the great house there was a wooden chimney. There was a wooden chimney, and the story of the children and their cruel uncle was carved on. It was inscribed on where? On the wooden chimney of the hall. And that story, the story of the children in the wood, it remained there till a foolish rich person got the chimney replaced with one of the marble with no story upon it. That the whole story down to the robin redbreast, till a foolish rich person pulled it down with no story upon it. And now there was no story because the chimney that was replaced by a marble. When Lamb told this story, here Alice put out one of her dear mother's looks. When he was telling this story to his kids, so what was the reaction of Alice? Alice put out one of her dear mother's looks. Alice is the name of his imaginary daughter. Too tender to be called upbraiding. It was so soft, she was looking so innocent that Charles Lamb is telling that it was not possible for him to scold her for that reaction or for her that expression. So when he was telling this story to his imaginary children, he felt somewhere that the children did not approve of the action of that foolish rich man when he got a marble chimney fitted there. So he saw that there Alice, there was a gentle anger on the face of Alice. At once, Lamb recalled that sometimes he used to see similar expression on the face of her mother. Whose mother? Alice's mother, means the wife, imaginary wife of Charles Lamb. But this expression was so tender, it was so soft that it could never be called anger. Charles Lamb could not scold her. Then I went on to say how religious and how good their great grandmother Field was. Again, autobiographical elements are here. Charles Lamb is now going to tell his dreamy children about their great grandmother Field, what kind of character she carried, that how much religious and how much good their great grandmother Field had been, how beloved and respected by everybody. So here now we are going to be aware of the character of Mrs. Sarah Field, that she was beloved and she was respected by everybody. Though she was not indeed the mistress of this great house. Now the grandmother of Charles Lamb Field was not the owner of that great house in Norfolk in which she lived. She was not the owner of that house, but had only the charge of it. We can say that she was only in charge of it, and yet in some respects she might be said to be the mistress of it too. And why she can be called the owner of it? Because she maintained its dignity, because she lived in that house in that way as if the house was her own, committed to her by the owner, and that house was given to Field by the owner, who preferred living in a newer and more fashionable mansion which he had purchased somewhere in the adjoining country. So what Lamb is telling here to kids, that Field was only the housekeeper and not the owner of the house. In spite of that, she lived in the house in a manner as if she were the owner. So long as she was alive, she maintained the dignity of the house. But still, she lived in it in a manner as if it had been her own, and kept up the dignity of the great house in a short while she lived. So now, Mrs. Field, she maintained very well the dignity of that house, which afterwards came to decay and was nearly pulled down, and all its old ornaments stripped and carried away to the owner's other house. But afterwards, what happened, that the house came to decay and it was pulled down. All its decorations were removed and carried away to the owner's new house where he started to live, a newer and more fashionable mansion which he had purchased somewhere in the adjoining country. So all the things, all the ornaments, all the decorative pieces, they were old, but they were carried away where? To the owner's new fashionable house. Where means in that new fashionable house, they were set up. They means decorative pieces, old ornaments, and they were set up. Where they were set up? In the new fashionable house. They were set up in the other house. However, what they looked as awkward as if someone were to carry away the old tombs they had seen lately at the abbey and stick them up in Lady C's tawdry gilt drawing room. So what Lamb is saying that all the old ornament or decorative piece, they looked very awkward because they were old and the house was new. So if you decorated, if you put old decorative pieces in your new fashionable house, of course they will look awkward, as if, and he is giving an example, as if someone had taken some tombstones from the graveyard in the Westminster Abbey. Okay, Abbey, that is graveyard. Graveyard, the complete name is Westminster Abbey. And he had set them up in showy drawing room of a rich lady. The decorations of the old house did not look appropriate in the new house. So here John is smiled. Who is John? John is the dreamy son of Charles Lamb. Dreamy daughter or imaginative daughter was Alice, and imaginary son is John. So Alice and John, they both are dream children. Now here John is smiled as much as to say that would be foolish indeed. And then I told, who is this I? Charles Lamb. Okay, because it is a subjective or personal essay and it is written in first person. Who is this I? The essayist or Lamb himself. And then he continued the story, and then I told how when she, who is this she? Mrs. Sarah Field, great grandmother of dream children or grandmother of Charles Lamb, when she came to die. So here we find the mixture or blend of humor and pathos. Humor, John is smiled, and now Charles Lamb, he has given another characteristic of pathos when he tells about the death of his grandmother Field, when he tells that when she came to die, her funeral, her grandmother of Charles Lamb, her funeral was attended by a concourse of all the poor and some of the gentry too of the neighborhood, because she was beloved and she was respected by all for many miles round, to show their respect for her memory. Why? Because she had been such a good and religious woman. So all this in these lines we find here very well the character, the complete full character of his grandmother, that she had been a very religious woman. And we can see here that Charles Lamb, his love for past, his love for his grandmother, who lived in a great house in Norfolk. So Charles Lamb is telling here his children that their great grandmother Field, she was a very popular woman, and when she died, her funeral procession was attended by a large crowd of all the poor people of the neighboring villages, and even some rich people, they also, that is some of the gentry too, and even some rich people, they also attended her funeral, and they had come to attend her last rites from many miles around Norfolk. Why they all had come? Because they wanted to show their respect for her memory, and it was because she had been a very good and very religious woman. Okay, she had been religious indeed, that she had learnt what? So good indeed that she knew all the psaltery by heart, because she was a religious woman and she knew very well all the psalm by heart. And a great part of the testament besides. Here little Alice spread her hands. So what he tells, that she had been very religious and she had learnt all the religious songs besides a great part of the Bible. It shows very well that the grandmother of Charles Lamb was a very pious, religious and popular woman. Then I told what a tall, upright, graceful person their great grandmother Field once was, and how in her youth she was esteemed the best dancer. So she was also the best dancer. Here Alice's little right foot played an involuntary movement till upon my looking grave it desisted. The best dancer, I was saying, in the country till a cruel disease called a cancer came and bowed her down with pain. So we come to know the reason of his grandmother's death. It happened because of this disease, fatal disease, cancer. But it could never bend her good spirits or make them stoop, but they were still upright because she was so good and religious. So here Charles Lamb is telling his dreamy children that his grandmother, she was a very gentle and religious minded lady, and when she died, her funeral procession was attended by a large number of people. He tells them that their great grandmother felt she was a very tall, upright, and graceful woman, and in her youth she was considered the best dancer. Okay, she was considered the best dancer in the village. He further said that she had been the best dancer till she fell a victim to a cruel disease called a cancer. Cancer bent her down with pain, but it could not bend her spirits. She suffered physically, but her spirits were never bowed. Her mind was always upright. She always remained very cheerful, happy, courageous, and she had a strong willpower because she was so religious and noble minded. She was so good and religious. Then I told how she was used to sleep by herself. Okay, she was used to sleep by herself in a lone chamber because she was good, she was religious, and she was very courageous. So she used to sleep alone in that big house of the great lawn house, and how she believed that an apparition of two infants, children, that tragic incident that took place in that house of two infants was to be seen at midnight. This house or this place was supposed to be ghost haunted place. It was supposed that there was the ghost of, or there were the ghost of two little infants, and they used to come at midnight, gliding up and down the great staircase near where she slept, where his grandmother slept. But she said those innocents would do her no harm. So those apparition of two infants were harmless, and how frightened I. But it was not so easy for Charles Lamb because he used to be very frightened with them. I used to be, though in those days I had my maid to sleep with me because I was never half so good or religious as she, and yet I never saw the infants. So Charles Lamb, he used to be very afraid of the ghost haunted stories of places, but not his grandmother. And Charles Lamb thinks that the reason was because she was good and she was very religious minded lady. Here John expanded all his eyebrows and tried to look very courageous. Then I told how good she was to all her grandchildren. So here we find that his grandmother was very kind hearted, she was very generous, and she used to love her all grandchildren. Having us to the great house in the holidays, where I in particular used to spend many hours by myself in gazing upon the old busts of the 12 Caesars, 12 Caesars, emperors of Rome, that had been emperors of Rome till the old marble heads would seem to live again. Oh, I to be turned into marble with them How I never could be tired with roaming about the huge mansion with its vast empty rooms with their worn out hangings, fluttering tapestry, carved oaken panels with the gliding almost rubbed out, sometimes in the spacious old fashioned gardens which I had almost to myself, unless when now and then a solitary gardening man would cross me. So all these are the here the mentions of his holidays, how he spent his free time or his holidays in that great house with his grandmother, what he used to do at that time, and how the nectarines and peaches hung upon the walls without my ever offering to pluck them because they were forbidden fruit, unless now and then, and because I had more pleasure in strolling about among the old melancholy looking yew trees or the fields and picking up the red berries and the fir apples, which were good for nothing but to look at, or in lying about upon the fresh grass with all the fine garden smells around me, or basking in the orangery till I could almost fancy myself ripening too along with the. So this is a very lengthy paragraph, and in all this paragraph he tells us about his spending all that time with his grandmother. He tells about the goodness of his grandmother. He tells the imaginary children that his grandmother felt she was very kind and loving to all her grandchildren, and she used to invite all of them, her grandchildren, to enjoy their holidays at the great house. In that house there were the statues of 12 Caesars who had been emperors of Rome, and Lamb loved to look at those statues. He would spend hours together in gazing at the statues of 12 Caesars. He would look fixed on them till they seemed to look alive, or he seemed to turn into marble like them. He enjoyed looking at the busts of 12 Caesars so much that he felt as if they were living beings, or he himself were lifeless like them. So here is the mention of all these spending holidays, oranges and the limes in that grateful warmth, or in watching the days that darted to and fro in the fish pond at the bottom of the garden. Okay, same story is going on, with here and there great sulky pike hanging midway down the water in silent state, as if it mocked at their impertinent friskings. I had more pleasure in these busy idle diversions than in all sweet flowers of peaches, nectarine, oranges, and such like common beds of children. Here John slyly deposited back upon the plate, again humor starts, a bunch of grapes, which not unobserved by Alice, he had meditated dividing with her, and both seemed willing to relinquish them for the present as irrelevant. So he is trying to present a humor here, that what is going on, the reaction of the children at the time of listening to the story. Then in somewhat a more high-end tone, I told how, though their great grandmother Field loved all her grandchildren. Okay, we come back to the same point, that she had been very kind hearted, very generous to all the great or grandchildren, and their great grandmother Field, she loved all her grandchildren. Yet in an special manner she might be said to love their uncle John Lamb. And now in this paragraph we are going to be aware of the elder brother of Charles Lamb named John Lamb, who is now the uncle of those children. And here we come to know the character of John Lamb. John Lamb, because he was so handsome and spirited a youth and a king to the rest of us, and instead of moping about in solitary corners like some of us, he would mount the most mettlesome horse he could get, when but an imp no bigger than themselves, and make it carry him half over the country in a morning, and join the hunters when there were any out. So here we find the likes and dislikes of John Lamb, how much he was loved by all because he was handsome and he lived just like a king. And yet he loved the old great house and gardens too, but had too much spirit to be always pent up within their boundaries. And how their uncle John Lamb, grew up to man's estate as brave as he was handsome. So here we find that John Lamb, he had never been responsible in his life for his family. In spite of that, Charles Lamb is appreciating his elder brother to the admiration of everybody. He was admired by each and every one. But of their great grandmother Field, most especially, and how he used to carry me upon his back. Again, pathesis starts that his elder brother John Lamb, he used to carry me Charles Lamb, upon his back when I was a lame footed boy. For he was a good bit older than me, many a mile when I couldn't walk for pain. And how in after life he became lame footed too, and I did not always make allowances enough for him when he was impatient and in pain. So Charles Lamb is feeling here guilty that when he was in pain, his elder brother always helped him, taking him on his back. But when John Lamb himself was in pain, Charles Lamb never helped him, nor remember sufficiently how considerate he had been to me when I was lame footed, and how when he died. Okay, this means that again Charles Lamb is recollecting all the memories of his elder brother or of his grandmother. Though he had not been dead an hour, it seemed as if he had died a great while ago. Such a distance there is betwixt life and death. And how I bore his death, as I thought pretty well at first. I was very happy at that time when he died, but later what he felt? Afterwards it haunted and haunted me, and though I did not cry or take it to heart as some do, and as I think he would have done if I had died, there was no tears in my eyes. I did not cry, I did not weep for my brother, but I am sure if I had been at his place, he would cry, he would shed tears for me. Yet I missed him all day long, and knew not till then how much I had loved him. So Charles Lamb missed his brother after his departure, after his death, and he came to know that how much he loved him, or his elder brother John Lamb. I missed what? I missed his kindness, and I missed his crossness, and wished him to be alive again. So again we find here pathos, sad note, sad element, and he is mixturing both, to be quarreling with him, because we quarreled sometimes, rather than no have him again. I wanted to have each and everything with my elder brother. I wanted to make a fight with him again, and was as uneasy without him as he, their poor uncle, must have been when the doctor took off his limb. So we come to know everything about his family members, what all happened with them. With his grandmother, she suffered from cancer, and what happened with his elder brother, the doctor, they had taken off his limb. Here the children fell a crying, and they asked if their little mourning which they had on was not for Uncle John. And they looked up. Children, they couldn't listen to this story, this pathetic story of their uncle, and they cried, and they prayed me not to go on about their uncle, but to tell them some stories about their pretty dead mother. So now Charles Lamb, he started to tell about their pretty dead mother. And who was this pretty dead mother? The beloved of Charles Lamb, whom he loved the most, but he could not marry because of some personal reason. Then I told how for 7 long years, again autobiographical elements, again personal note, Charles Lamb is telling the reason that why he couldn't marry, or for how many long he waited for his beloved for 7 long years, in hope, sometimes in despair, yet persisting ever. I quoted the fair Alice, okay, W. Winterton. So here Charles Lamb is telling about his beloved whom he couldn't marry, Winterton. And as much as children could understand, it explained to them what coyness and difficulty and denial meant in maidens, when suddenly turning to Alice, the soul of the first Alice looked out her eye at her eyes with such a reality of representment that I became in doubt which of them stood there before me. When he was telling about their mother, Charles Lamb felt as if there was a lot of resemblance between Alice's daughter and that is his beloved Alice Winterton. So he got confused that which one was before him. I became in doubt which of them stood there before me, or whose that bright hair was, and while I stood gazing both the children, they grew gradually fainter to my view, receding. And now Charles Lamb, he was coming out of dream, he was coming to the reality and still receding, and the children, they started to grow gradually fainter, till nothing at last but 2 mournful features were in the uttermost distances. And now Charles Lamb, he felt that he was in dream, and those 2 figures were dreamy, or only his dream, with which without speech strangely impressed upon me the effects of speech. They couldn't say anything. Those 2 children, they were growing gradually fainted, and Charles Lamb felt as if they were saying, we are not of Alice, no of thee, because they were imaginary children, no are we children at all. The children of Alice call Bertram father, we are nothing, less than nothing and dreams. We are only what might have been, and must wait upon the tedious shores of Lethe. Lethe is a river, the name of a river, millions of ages before we have existence and a name, and immediately a waking. So at once what happened, that the dream children, they start withdrawing. Actually they speak nothing, but the writer feels that they are saying that they are not his children. So this awakens Charles Lamb from his dream, or from his imagination. The dream children, they are supposed to say that they are not of Alice, no of Charles Lamb. They go to the extent of saying that they are not children at all. They present the harsh reality of Lamb's life before him. It is Bertram and not Charles Lamb whom Alice's children call father. Although Lamb had loved and courted Alice Winterton for 7 years, he could not marry her. She was married to Bertram. The children say that they are nothing, they are less than nothing, they are only dreams, they are only what might have been. They would have been his real children if he had married Alice Winterton. They must wait for millions of ages on the tiresome banks of Lethe. Lethe is the name of a river, the river of forgetfulness. Only then they will be able to have existence and a name. So here Charles Lamb, he immediately awakens, and what he says, how he ends this essay, I found myself quietly seated in my bachelor armchair, and he comes to reality and he realizes that he is still unmarried, and those children came only in his dream, where I had fallen asleep. So it is very clear, dream children, the title, dream children, that he had fallen asleep where he was seated, okay, where he was seated in his armchair, and there he dreamt with the faithful Bridget. Who is this Bridget? Bridget is actually Mary Lamb, sister of Charles Lamb, unchanged by my side. What does it mean unchanged? Because Bridget, she had fits of insanity. She was mad and there was no change in her condition. She was still mad. But John Lamb or James Ilya was gone forever. I was dreaming that those children, they were imaginative children, and there was also no change in the condition of my sister Mary Lamb, but there was no change. That was John Lamb was not there because he had gone forever. So this was the complete essay of Charles Lamb, Dream Children Are Reverie.